Hello and welcome to another prompt. So this is the fifth in order of when I wrote it, but not the fifth in release order because I released the aromantic ones during aromantic week. So this is the fifth one. Sorry that I'm being a bit quiet. I've got a sore throat at the moment, but I did want to get this story out of the way so that I had something to release today. If it's too quiet, I will turn it up in post-production. So, the prompt is, there was always a locked door in Grandma's house that nobody ever entered, at least not until now, when the door appears to be wide open. And the story is called Hunting the Wolf. Brick couldn't believe his eyes. In all his 16 years of life, he'd never once seen his door unlocked. It called for him. Was he allowed to enter? If he wasn't, why would it be open? Why would it seem so inviting? He pushed his fair foot deeper into the shaggy white carpet, tethering himself to the spot. Daring not allow his temptation to overcome him, Grandma was downstairs. He could always check with her first before entering, but he found his body ignoring any rationality, and before he knew it, he was outside the open door. The room was small and empty. A window sat on the far wall, shrouded by a thick beige tarp. Strange, Brick thought aloud, as he followed his legs into the room. Having no access to a room your entire life, it's easy to imagine all kinds of exciting things that may lay behind the barrier. Another bedroom or bathroom, perhaps a room where a long-exiled relative may live. In short, the room was disappointing to Brick. It was clear to him the room had been locked for what could only be one reason. It served no purpose. There were enough bedrooms for Grandma and guests, and it needn't be used for storage. They had the attic for that. Brick sighed and turned towards the door. Grandma stood in the doorway, smiling from ear to ear. "Take a seat, boy." She motioned to the floor. Brick looked down and did as he was told, taking his place on the soft cream carpet, a shade brighter than the carpet laid out in the hall. Recently cleaned. Grandma slapped her hands together and turned back to the door. She shuffled out the room, leaving Brick alone. It was 10 minutes before Grandma returned. During that time, Brick had debated getting up at least 50 times, but he remained patient, excited for his Grandma's return. "I have it," Grandma cooed from the hallway, before emerging seconds later holding a dusty old book. She threw the book to the ground, allowing it to skid along the floor to Brick's restless and numb feet. He grabbed the book and read the title. "Fairy Tales for Children," he groaned. "You make me wait all this time for this?" Grandma laughed as she took her place standing beside her grandson. "Turn to page 66, she ordered. "Little Red Riding Hood. I know this story. Everyone knows this story." Brick slammed the book shut. Grandma wagged her finger at the boy. "There is no way to treat our family history." Confusion riddled Brick's face. "Le Petit Chaperon Rouge was a distant ancestor of ours. She fought the wolf with the help of the woodsman and blessed our family with riches beyond comprehension." Brick couldn't believe his ears. "Grandma, this is a fairy story. We are not descendants of a folk hero." Grandma rolled her eyes. "You don't believe in these stories?" Brick shook his head as he pushed his palms into the floor, helping off his bum. "No, of course I don't." He bended his knees and began straightening his back. "No worries, you will see soon." The second Brick stood at its full height. Grandma produced a blade from her pocket and slashed it across the boy's neck. He grabbed at the wound in horror as blood gushed out over his hands and onto the clean carpet. Grandma ran to the door and grabbed a blood-soaked cloak hanging on the inside, hidden from the view of any entering individual who failed to close the door behind them. Grandma threw the cloak over Brick's shoulders, forced his arms away from his neck, and fastened it onto him, using the ribbon which cut further into his wounded flesh. It wasn't long before the boy lost all consciousness. Trees surrounded Brick as he looked down to the trodden path below his muddled brown boots. The sounds of nature floated around him, with the breeze as he gripped tighter to the woven basket in his hand. "Good morrow, young Scarlet," a voice called from behind. She turned on her heel to see nothing. She turned back to the direction she was heading and saw the figure before her in all its glory. "Where are you heading today, my tender plump friend?" Brick watched the scene unfold, trapped within the girl's body. "Oh, good morning, sir. Today I am making passage to Granny's. We are to spend the day baking cakes and reminiscing about all the times we spent together before. The man smiled with a coldness Brick had never experienced before. Such a delightful way to spend a lovely day. Would you enjoy some company? The man offered his arm, which the girl cheerfully accepted. The trio, or the pair from the perspective of the unknowing host and the man she clung to, continued forward many places before reaching the most secluded part of the woodland. I grow tired, Scarlet yawned as she looked up to the stranger. Dear me, we can't have that. Let's find somewhere to rest our legs before we continue on further. Scarlet liked this idea and followed the man with willingness to a small tree stump. He looked down and took a seat, spreading his legs open wide. He patted his knee, inviting Scarlet to take a seat. The girl felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Brick screamed for her to run, but his non-existent words fell to their ears. On second thought, I can rest at Granny's. It's not much further. Brick sighed with relief from within. Oh, but I must insist you take a seat upon my knee. The man's glare pierced into Scarlet's soul as he rolled his tongue along his fangs, displayed in all their glory. No. Scarlet smiled, taking a step back. Thank you for the offer, sir, but time waits for no girl. As she backed up further and further, the man got up from the stump and began creeping towards her. Sweat ran down Scarlet's face as her heartbeat pounded through the ears of both her and Brick. Scarlet's foot snagged against a tree root, and she fell on her rump, hurling the baking ingredients from her basket into the air. To rain all around her, covered in flour and egg yolk, she shielded her eyes from the shadow of the man, which loomed over her, surrounded by the burning sun, which gave the illusion of hellfire engulfing a lost soul of the night. The man howled as he collapsed on his face beside a shaken Scarlet. Another man stood behind him, wielding a now blood-soaked axe, which had just been retrieved from the back of a vicious creature digging his claws into the dirt, attempting to work through his agony. The woodsman offered a hand to Scarlet, who grabbed it and pulled herself into the man, sopping into his shirt. He held her close to him as he kept an eye on the predator crawling along the floor on his hands and knees, like an injured hound. Are you okay? The woodsman asked Scarlet, not tearing his eyes from the beast before them. Scarlet lifted her head from his shirt and looked up at him, nodding. I need you to run to somewhere safe. Do you understand? Scarlet shook her head. What do you mean, no? The woodsman asked, baffled. Scarlet let go of the man's side and snatched the heavy axe from his hand. The weight tore at the girl's undeveloped muscles as she used all her strength to lift the weapon and bring it down upon the beast. The woodsman wasted no time in grabbing the axe handle, easing the pressure from the little girl's arms. Together they hacked and chopped at the screaming vermin until they both were satisfied and caked from head to toe in blood. Scarlet took the woodsman's hand in hers. They dropped the axe on the ground with a clunk, and the girl led him all the way to Granny's, who almost fainted when she opened the door to see the bloody mess standing before her. What happened to you? She gasped. We encountered a wolf, Granny. Scarlet giggled to Granny's relief. My dear, you should have brought me this pelt. I would have made you a nice new cloak. Scarlet shook her head. No, thank you, Granny. I like this one just fine. The blood makes me feel powerful. Brick opened his eyes to his grandma's smiling face. How do you feel now, boy? Brick touched his still gushing neck as he looked down to his blood-drenched cloak. I feel powerful, Granny. With that, the bleeding stopped and his wound disappeared as if it were never there. Granny led him to the window, lifting the tarp to reveal the street below. A young man hobbled down the street, following a young woman, who kept looking between her phone and over her shoulder at her pursuer. Brick hadn't noticed Grandma leave his side, but she must have, for when he turned to face her, she held out an ancient axe. Brick accepted it gratefully, and turned his attention back to his wolf, who he would never allow to get a taste of his prey's flesh.